Hello, I'm Shirley Adams, and this is program number 7 in the series, The Midas Touch. All that glitters used to be for evening, but now we also see a little daylight shimmer and shine. You decide when and where to wear it, and if you're going to sew it, let's examine the possibilities. There are distinct differences in metallic fabrics found on the market, both in what they will do and in how they can be handled. Here's a woven lame, for instance, which is very thin and it's crisp, and it almost crackles, and this would work very well in such things as big puffy sleeves or big puffy skirts. Don't try to drape it, it just won't work that way. Now the way you'd handle this is very carefully with an iron, because there's a little mylar in there, it would melt. You have to use a press cloth with it, and you have to use a kind of a cool iron, very cool synthetic setting. And here's a belt that I made with it. Now I had to have a higher setting for this because I was fusing something to it. So when it's flat like this, it doesn't look too wonderful. It puckers a little bit. But when it rounds around the waist, it's just fine. This was a learning experience for me. And I found out by doing this that, this is how I do not treat it. I handle it with greater care the next time. So do a small project, do a small sample maybe, and find out what it will or will not do. Here's another one with which you can do no wrong. This is a relatively inexpensive one. It's in every store imaginable right now. It's liquid metal. It comes in gold and silver and copper and a few other metallics, but just look how soft and fluid that is. You don't try to make a puffy sleeve with that, it won't puff. It wants to just drape and slink and do something of that sort. I saw a picture of this and it almost looks like they have the same metallic used in it. Perhaps they do. So it gives you an idea. You can do that channel quilting through it very easily. So one idea, I like to look through all those pictures to see exactly what it will do. And something else that I have here that I haven't decided yet what it'll do. I walked into a store and absolutely fell in love with this. I thought no matter what it costs, I am going to get this fabric. Now not only is this a woven that has a black background and it has metallic threads woven through it, but on top of this they have printed in greens and lavenders and so on, they have printed this floral design. So examine something of this very carefully before you cut into it, not only because of the expense of it, but because you want to treat it right. And you have to decide whether, for instance, am I going to match stripes in it? Am I going to match that floral design that's in it? Well, I decided that floral design is so indistinct, there's no reason to match that. I will definitely, any place there's a seam, be sure to match the stripes. So think this through carefully. I'm also thinking through what I'm going to make out of it. I bought enough for a jacket of some sort. So I'm going to look through the magazines to find a whole lot of jacket ideas before I decide on what I want to do with mine. But it's a kind of a good idea. Not that I will copy any of these things, but just to get ideas and think about what's going to work successfully. This is what I'll look at. Getting back to this metallic that I have here, I find that it is so easy to work with. It goes through the washer and dryer, if you can imagine. It's actually a tricot back here, and it's a metallic printed on that tricot. So it goes through the washer and dryer. It will press with the iron, either with a press cloth or you can put the iron directly on it, and it won't do anything nasty. It just does very easily. So you can see if I can get it out straight here because it's so soft and slippery, but you can see it does nothing wrong to it to do that. For that reason you can fuse, and I'm going to do a little fusing to it in some projects later. But something else very nice that this does, isn't that pretty the way it drapes? Something else very nice that this does is, because of its drapeability and because you don't want to see the back side of it, the back side is not pretty, remember. It looks like this. That's not too wonderful. You want to see the front side only. Therefore, if you're going to see both layers, both back and front of it, you do it in some project where you use 2 layers. There's a seam all the way around this. And what I would use this for, notice how it's sort of a semicircle. What I would use this for is possibly a belt. Just tie it around and over to one side and it drapes well. And this could be used on any sort of an outfit. But it also could go inside a suit jacket and drape around and look like a blouse. So there's another way, but anyway, it drapes. That's the point of it. So use it for something that utilizes that capability. Another fabric that I have down here is this brocade. And I decided with this brocade, it's another kind of expensive fabric, but when you make accessories out of it, you really don't need much, so the expense isn't maybe too much of a consideration. 1/4 of a yard made this bag, and it also decorated this blouse that I have back here. So it isn't really much expense. This is what it looks like as you buy it. It's sort of see-through. It's on a chiffon backing, and it has these little metallic things. Well, I made the purse out of just 2 pieces of paper is what I used for my pattern, 2 pieces of typing paper side by side. That was the size this purse started out to be, and then it's simply a zipper in the top and a seam all around it, so a very simple little purse. But I found that this fabric also fuses just beautifully. So here's how to fuse it. Again, that transfer web with the peel-off sheet. So I have first fused some of that to the back, and you can fuse directly on this fabric, doesn't matter a bit. After you have that under fused on it, then cut out whatever design in here that you want to transfer to something else. I'm going to cut out just this little purple leaf, and then I'm going to fuse it onto another piece of fabric. Now what's nice about this capability, this fusing, is, here I'll put it on this black in this case. What's nice about this is the fact that with no effort practically at all, you can make a very, very quick outfit. If, for instance, you are just going to go to this one party, and to that one party you want an outfit, and maybe you'll never wear it again. Well, you have very little money in something of this sort, and this easily, it's fused. You don't actually have to stitch around it at all, unless you're going to dry clean it or unless you're going to wash it later. Then maybe you better think about doing some stitching. But this would go through a few wearings, and it wouldn't come off. It fuses so well, either to this type of woven fabric or to some of the metallic fabric. So try some of these things. Try a little fusing and make yours go a long way if you'd like to stretch it out somewhat. That liquid fabric that I liked so much, I made in this t-shirt back here. And this is really just a very simple t-shirt. There is nothing to it. It only has seams under the arms. I'll show in the next few weeks how to make this. But this was fused on first before it was stitched, and then stitched afterwards, very simply. I left the big selvage down at the bottom here, down at the waist, because it's going to be tucked in, and I didn't even care. I therefore didn't put a hem in it. So here's one. It took a few minutes to make this, less than an hour. Here's another one, and this one's exactly the same. And this is the other fabric that I use, the crepe fabric. Polyester crepe is what it is. And on this I fused a gold brocade, and with the same amount of ease, just very simply with the iron directly on it, didn't even use a press cloth, but proceed with caution. You don't know for sure on yours if it is going to take a press cloth or whatever. So do it cautiously and try out to see what's going to happen. Well, I found out that not only does this press easily, not only does it go through the washer and dryer if you want to do that to it, but it stitches easily. Now it's a good idea when you stitch it to use a Teflon needle. That's a stretch needle that you use for swimsuit fabrics. Use that also in a fabric like this because it stitches so much better. And also you want to perhaps make bigger stitches. I'll just make a quick seam here and then open it up. I already have this threaded with some gold metallic thread. But, okay, on the back, if you're stitching seams on the inside, it really wouldn't matter what you use. You could just as easily use black thread or whatever. But if I would be doing any top stitching, of course, I would want to use a metallic that agrees with it. But you can see how it very nicely seams. This press is open beautifully, so there's no problem there. So if you want a little touch of glitter, what I'm saying is this might be a good bet because there is no risk here. There's very little expense, and you can't fail with it. So some of the things that I might make out of that also, besides what I just showed you on the fusible things, a belt. Do you like this belt? This one is very, very simple. So simple that it'll only take me a few minutes to make it. And this is with that same liquid gold. And I happen to have a buckle at home that just went with it very nicely, but you can find buckles like this in the fabric shops, in the craft shops. And the way you make this belt is like this. I have cut here some of the same metallic, and this one I'm going to do in silver. And after you have this cut, I'm sort of doing a quick job here by having it partially done. After you have this cut, and what I have cut here is a piece of this, it's the liquid silver. I've cut a piece of this about 12 inches wide, and it's about 4 inches longer than my waist because I want something to turn back on each side to attach to a buckle. So after I've cut that 12 by whatever piece, I have stitched a seam right in the back of it, just a small seam, just the width of the presser foot here. I then on the ironing board fused a piece of this fusible fleece. Now you can find this also in any of the fabric shops, and I did cut this piece of fusible fleece the exact size of my waist, or maybe even a little bit shorter, so that it would easily go through the buckle, and just put the iron on it to fuse it in place. And then to finish up this belt, I'm going to simply put my hand through to the other side and pull it right side out. And all I have to do to finish this is gather up the ends. If I just gather these up, and you could stitch those gathers if you would prefer, but if I would just gather this up, I could put it in a buckle of some sort. Now that buckle might be, as I had on the gold belt, it might be a two-piece buckle. This silver one, for instance, this is a silver and gold combination, and it has a bracket on the back, and I could just put that through so that it would be easy to attach, and attach it back here and attach the other end to, I did it backwards, which isn't too much of a problem. I can put it in frontwards this time. Okay, but anyway, this attaches very easily, and as you can see, it's just all sort of scrunched up, gathered up, and if you do this to both ends, then put it in your buckle, you have all this quickly a belt made. And the maximum time you could possibly spend on this, I think, is about a half hour. So if you need something quickly, this might be a good bet. What I did also on this belt that I have finished here, the gold one, see what happens when I have this all kind of gathered up, but it sort of spreads apart. It doesn't stay all gathered up. So I did on this one take a few hand stitches here and there just to keep those tucks in place so that they would stay when I put it around my waist, and I can move and nothing falls apart. So still, you can do that within a half hour and not put much effort into it. So it's a good bet if you want something quick, something easy. Another buckle that I have here might be this rhinestone one. And this is a pretty one to put with the silver also, or with the gold. So any of those metallics, depending on how much glitter you want, how festive your evening's going to be, think it through and decide what's most appropriate. Something else I've used that liquid metal for is a bag. I haven't finished this bag yet, but I'll show you how this is going to be done. This bag is very similar to the Chanel bags that you see, the quilted bags, and I got it this far along. Now all I have done to this bag so far is, for one thing, I fused the metallic fabric to some of that fusible fleece, and then I did the quilting. So I'll just do a little quick fusing here, and then we'll do a little bit of quilting to show you how easy that it's going to be to do. Just be sure that your fusible fleece is here with the right side up, the business side up, or you're in trouble if you do it the opposite way. You're going to have it fused to your ironing board. So I do have, we do hope, the fusible side up, and I can either fuse it on this side, or if I prefer, I can turn it over and fuse it with the fleece side up. I've tried it both ways, and I found it didn't make a bit of difference. It worked well both ways, but it does fuse in place very easily. And I actually should hold it here a little bit longer in each place. Here's where a press might do the quicker job. But after you get this fused, what's easy to sew on it now is the fact that that fusing it to the fleece did stiffen it considerably, and because of this stiffness, you're not going to have to put anything under it when you do any sewing. You're not, for instance, going to have to put it in a hoop. You're not going to have to put any stitch and tear under it, as you would frequently when you do some stitching of this sort, because it's stiff enough all by itself. What I would like to do as I do these diagonal lines of stitching here is probably establish one line, and then after you establish just that one line, you don't have to do any more. So to do it very simply, I'm simply going to fold mine so that I have a diagonal going. I'll do this at an exact 45-degree angle here by folding an L square here. So I'm just creasing it enough that I can see that crease when it opens up, and then I can then put it under the machine and do the stitching. Now after you get this one line stitched, and I'm going to do kind of big stitches, there's no reason to do small ones. Okay, after I get this one line of stitching done, then I want to do a whole lot of other lines that are parallel to this or perpendicular to this. So the way to get them to go just right is to put a marvelous little gadget that you have in your machine with your machine, and if you don't, you can improvise something. But that little gadget is this little thing that goes in. It goes in back here. There's always a screw in the back of the machine. And what I'm going to do is adjust this. I'm going to adjust it so that it is whatever width I want it to be. I'm going to put mine about an inch apart, each of the little lines of stitching that I make. So I'll put it down here, and don't get it too far down on your machine. Make sure it's up enough so that when the foot's down, it won't push too hard on your fabric, or it would push the top layer of fabric along, so you have to be a little careful about that. But okay, what I want to do then when I do the second row of stitching is just make sure this attachment that I put on, this little marker, this quilting guide here, I want to make sure that when I put it on, it's going to be right on the old line I stitched, and when I stitch the new line, then it will just follow along. I don't even have to watch my new line. I'm just watching to make sure that my quilting gauge is on the first line. So you do one after another of those lines. It really just takes a few minutes to quilt the whole bag. Very, very quick process. And after you do enough of them this way, then you want to do them the other way. I'm just going to make my fold the other way so that I can establish a line there also. I'm just going to make my fold so that it's exactly perpendicular to my first lines. So here I'll just fold these until they do come out exactly in the same place here. And when they do, I'll know that this fold will be perpendicular to it so that they work out right. You could even do something as drastic as marking it in some way, but I'm doing this very quickly. And after this line's established, then I would do the same thing repeatedly until I have the whole fabric covered with these lines. Now this Chanel look has become so popular, I think every manufacturer, every brand name is doing this, so it's just fine for you to do the same thing and see what you can emulate there. After you get this all quilted, then we're going to have to think about 2 layers of it. I want, of course, here, 2 sides of the bag. Get some sort of a zipper, some sort of a color that just sort of blends in with it. And I like to make mine longer because I can cut it off as I stitch and get rid of the excess there later. But I want 2 of these, of course, and then I want 2 lining pieces. Now the lining is up to you. Perhaps no one's going to see the inside of the bag but you, so it's up to you if you even want to line it. I do. So what I have done here is I applied the zipper, is put the zipper in between a layer of the metallic and a layer of the lining. So here I have my 2 layers. And I'm going to put the right side of the zipper, here's where the tab is, so I'll put the right side of that zipper down here at the top of the bag, and I'm going to put this on top of it, and then this is where I'll do the stitching, right along the edge here. And I'll just put a pin to show you where the stitching would be. So it's going to be right here. I would then get this out of the way and do the same thing to the other side of the zipper tape until I end up with this. All I have left to do now to finish this bag, to make a very simple evening purse, is unzip the zipper for one thing, or unzip it most of the way so that you have the tab somewhere here inside, because you're going to have to turn it right side out. And then after I have this unzipped, I'm going to fold this so that right sides are together, like so, and I'm going to simply stitch around these 3 sides here. And stitch right across the zipper, right out at the edge, and then after I have it zipped, it'll turn right side out through this opening. So a very quick project, very simple. It would make nice gifts also. Now as far as what you stitch with, here I've used gold, but I could have used just a wealth of wonderful threads on it. These come in dozens of colors. All these are metallics. Lost my gold, but I have gold anyway in the machine. But just notice what a whole lot of pretty colors these come in. So choose your colors and have whatever go with the outfit by using different colors. I would like to also use those wonderful metallic threads to do a little decorative stitching, because I'm seeing so much of this on what every designer does the last season or 2 and what they are continuing to do in the future, this type of thing. Notice how beautifully this is done in metallic threads, and it has all kinds of designs on it that possibly you can find a way to do on your machine. Maybe it's doing it just freehand, maybe you can do it by pushing the buttons and having it do it without any work, but I was just trying a little bit of it here on this silver to see what it would do, and here I have silver on silver. I think I'll put this back in the machine now and dial something. I have gold threaded in the machine, so I think I'll see what the gold and silver look like together. So whatever design I'm going to do, well, I'll do the same one that I had done down there by punching it in here and punch another. There we go. Maybe. No, I think I have a different one, but that's okay. I'd like to see what this one looks like. And then I'm going to stitch this and see what comes out of it. So mixing metallics is kind of a fun thing. This is fascinating to see a machine work. And it cuts itself off when it's finished, so I'll simply cut the thread here. I kind of like the silver on gold, don't you? So I'll do a couple more of those. Let's build a start of a flower here. So I'll start the next one in the very same spot and get my hand out of it and see what happens here. Now, not only could this be a flower, but come to think of it, it could very easily be sort of a flame. If you want to build a little fire there, metallic seems appropriate for that, and especially if you would do it maybe in some of the flame colors, you could have that going instead of a flower, or flowers come in those colors. So this one stopped. I'll do another one and then show you what's happening. Can you kind of see what's happening so far? The more of these you do, the prettier it gets and the more complicated. And still, minimum of effort. We're not doing much work here. We're just watching it happen. Well, if you would like to cover this whole piece of fabric with elaborate designs of all sort, either push every button that your machine has and try them all out first to make sure that you know exactly what you can do, and then also look through all those wonderful pictures to see what kind of designs they've done, because most of those designs you probably can emulate and do something very similar. So change the colors, add colors, put them together, and after you get all of that finished, then that's when you could make this bag, either out of the decorated with the elaborate stitching this way, or the chenille quilting, and then finish up the bag. Now also with the chenille bag, of course, there's usually a chain. In fabric shops, you can buy chains. They perhaps have a half-dozen different types. You buy the length that you want, if you just want a little carry-on handle, or if you want a shoulder strap, buy whatever length chain is going to be needed to finish up that bag and have a real great chenille look. I'd like to try some other stitching. Now you can't really stitch very well on one layer of fabric like this. Anytime you're going to do some stitching on a single layer, you're going to have to put some stitch and tear or some stabilizer under it. That's what I have on the bottom of this. Here's some stabilizer. After you stitch, it can tear away. But the reason you'd put this stabilizer on is to do something of this sort. Add pearls, and I've used a different foot for that. While I still have, well, I'll take the foot off and do that. The foot I would use is something that has a big space underneath, so look through your feet to see what has a space. It might be a braiding foot, a cording foot, it'll be called something of that sort, but see what has the biggest space, and that space is what then will go over these pearls and do that design. Not only will it go over the pearls, but you might also stitch over some sequins. If you're going to stitch over sequins, and I'll put it back just on straight stitch or do a little bit of zigzag here, I guess. If I'm going to do this type of thing, I'm going to have to, for one thing, switch templates and put one in that'll do zigzagging, and rather than switch, I'm just going to go ahead with this one. But this cord would go very nicely under that, so that you might do some sort of a stitch with this. It would go under that same cording foot instead of the pearls. If you stitch down some sequins, make sure that you stitch those going with the direction of the sequins, or you're in trouble. Notice anytime you buy sequins by the yard this way, I'm rubbing them in one way here, and this is very smooth. So here is the way I would put them in the machine and stitch over them. If I would try to stitch the other way, where they all rough up like fish scales do when you're scaling a fish, If they all rough up, you aren't going to be able to do it. You have to stitch with those scales. The same thing is true if you're going to just do a straight seam through these wonderful sequin fabrics like this. It's all sequined, it's a stretch. You do some sort of a tube top out of these. But this can be done very easily. And they're plastic, they aren't metal. You aren't going to have to worry about hitting any of those things and have something hideous happen. You can just put a foot on this and stitch right over them. And straight stitch in this case is what it will be. And this straight stitch will hold well. So this is going to be another quick outfit if you'd like to make a top out of this. And make bigger stitches. There's no sense in small ones on this, so I would make rather large stitches as I stitch away, but you can hear they're plastic. You can stitch right through them. It's no problem whatsoever. And let me show you what that seam looks like then if I turn it right side out. So here it is, worked out just fine. So all that glitters can be pure gold in your wardrobe if you consider the possibilities, if you experiment a little to see what works and make something just absolutely wonderful. Well, there's a pattern that's also golden in that it's so valuable, the T, a very simple yet very effective pattern, and it will be considered next time. This T-shirt pattern will make up so many ways, it's unbelievable versatility we'll explore and see what surprises we can produce.